couple things I talked about. I mentioned these wings. They look from standstill like, who cares? What the hell is this going to do? I was joking that it's just a compartment for my wallet or something. But at about 80 miles an hour, I reached down and I did that, and holy cow, it was insane how much more wind protection I had. And really, the easiest way to think about it, it's not like there was so much wind you were struggling on the bike, but it calms the cockpit down substantially. Crazy. So really impressive. Those things are pretty cool. Now, I want to talk briefly about I keep saying, and people keep saying that ride this, man, it feels small. This bike feels small. I measured mirror to mirror. I threw a ruler in here, and I threw a ruler down here from crash bar to crash bar at the widest point, and the saddlebags in the back there, the handlebars, and in short, this bike is about 1 inch narrower. Okay, now front to back I did not measure. I read some literature that says the wheelbase is like a 1/4 inch longer. I do not feel it at all, and so it definitely does feel smaller. It feels considerably lighter. It is physically narrower. Really impressive when you sit on it. You're like, wow. But a couple things I want to point out that I think are pretty cool. So if you remember the crash bars on the 1250, these are not only narrower, but the design is a bit different. And one of the things I really like is this rubber piece. This is a hard rubber piece. You crash this thing over and over and over again, and you're not going to damage this. The crash bar, not if, especially for people going to motor school with this thing, you're not going to damage your cylinder head, which I think is pretty cool. I can say though, I've drug these crash bars around over and over and over. They're solid, they're thick, no issues, and dragging the crash bar felt smooth. So I'm not saying that's a great idea and go for it and do it, but when it did touch down, where it touches down is right here. So you can see some scraping right here. That's where it touches down. And other than that, no issues. I have not experienced dropping the bike, so I'm not sure about these rear crash bars. I mentioned when I was in Germany, I really do like, as silly as it is, two things with these new bags. I like this bracket here. It's pretty beefy, so these things are pretty sturdy. It had a light back here on the 1250 that was motion censored, which would go off often if you just walked by the bike. Now the light is over here, so that's kind of cool. It's in the bag. And the handle, I like the handle a lot better. It's just right in here. Silly little stuff. And the button to open the top box is back here instead of over here. So from grabbing it from this side of the bike, pretty easy to actuate it. I did mention, one other thing I did mention, but really quick. So it's a 190 rear. Why does that matter? Well, basically, theoretically, that's a wider tire. So we're gonna have more contact patch at all lean angles, which could be really good. I don't personally notice a huge difference. What I was worried about with the 190 was that the bike was gonna feel heavier transitioning from side to side. And it doesn't at all. It's silly how much lighter it feels. Crazy. I'm gonna shut up about that, but you'll know why I talked so much about how this thing feels like a 600 or 700 underneath you, because you'll get on it and just go, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Really crazy. But I mentioned my knees. Now remember, on the 1250, right in here, you have this pocket. Well, I don't have that anymore. And I was a little concerned. I thought, man, this is not going to be great because I'm going to feel like I'm floating on the bike. I liked those pockets. Even back in the 1200 days, I would take surfboard tape, that really grippy sort of neoprene, but a little harder, and I would run that in here. And that's kind of how I knew, hey, this is where I need to live and it feels good. I don't have that here. However, the way this tank is laid out, if you know the 1250, it's more of a straight up and down here. So I feel like you're easier to move forward on this platform than on the 1250. And because of that, I don't really struggle getting myself up here on this bike, I will say that getting up forward on it, especially for tight turning, is the answer key to make this thing smooth. But now that I've spent more time on it, I'm starting to kind of muscle memory live a little bit further on the bike, and that's helpful. So all that to say, the fact that you don't have these sort of reference points are turning out to be kind of a non-issue, which is fantastic. Something I worried about. I will say, as far as a bit of a complaint, so I wear knee pads, which I don't really need now because I'm not hitting anything up here. However, on the right side, you'll notice there's this cutout, this little bulge, and it's for this hard plastic piece. So what I've done with my knee pad is now I've slid it over here. So now it lives like this, so that as I'm moving back and forth over this hard thing, it's not hurting me. When I was in Germany riding, I'm like, man, my right knee really hurts. And I really hadn't paid attention to that. And then I realized I got a big bruise on the inside of my knee, which is not great. So that knee pad will help me with that. Other than that, though, not really a big issue. Here's my brake lever. I don't remember if I showed this in Germany, but so this is something I run to have it a little bit lower. When I counterbalance a lot, and the further the bike goes over, the more my foot tends to want to just naturally start to bend down, and then I'm pushing on the rear brake when I don't want to. I do notice this rear brake is grabbier, much grabbier. It's stronger. Now, what I don't know is that because I'm coming in harder? Because as I mentioned earlier when I was riding, I definitely feel like the front end benefits from me driving it into the ground, like just really pushing this thing down. It just doesn't blink. I will find out what that looks like when I finally push past that traction space and that suspension load space. I have knee and shin guards on me and this Reacha jacket. When I do decide, hey, I'm gonna really let's see where the road ends, I'm probably gonna, I'll have all that on and we'll push it and see. But so that might be the reason this rear brake feels more sensitive. It's just because there's so much more load on the front that the rear is effectively a lot lighter. And let me just show you really quick, side to side, full lock. My understanding is that right there, that's about the 1250. And that, so you're looking at about that. How have I come up with this math in my head where, okay, Quinn, how did you measure that? The way I measured it was, I have a little technique for picking this motorcycle up, and when it's on its side and you have the bars turned all the way, say if it fell toward us and the bars were all the way turned to the right, that wheel is effectively perpendicular, and it's easy for me to push directly into the tire. It's almost like a T, right? I'm pushing straight in, the tire's at a perfect T. Well, now when I turn the bars all the way to the lock, it's past that T. So what's happening is, if I'm not holding the front brake, if I start pushing the bike up, it starts rolling that way, which tells me the wheel is past perpendicular for sure. So that's about having it on its side. The other day when I was up in Bakersfield, we were playing around with that while it was laid down, and that was about the difference. So think about that from a big turning movement, right? You want to make a full radius turn. Think about if that's your turning radius and then you had that. It seems subtle, but it's a lot. You're probably, I would say, in a turning movement, you're looking at easily 6 inches to a foot of just free turning movement, which we all know the difference in some of these cone patterns. An extra 6 inches or a foot is like the difference between, live or die, right? So pretty cool. I want to see, when I was in Germany, I noticed that extra turning radius felt like it was standing me back up. I would drop it over and push full lock, and the bike wanted to lift back up. I'm not experiencing that here. I think part of that is because with this bike, with this US spec bike, the suspension package is sort of standard as far as ride height, where I had it in a dynamic setting that jacks the rear 30 millimeters and the front about 4, and it's stiffer. So if you factor that in, when I talk about the rear felt like it was losing traction in Germany, and I felt like it wanted to stand back up, those two things, just based on the fact that it's sitting 30 millimeters higher in the rear and a little higher in the front, and it's a lot stiffer, I'm going to lose traction easier under acceleration, but that could also absolutely contribute to this thing. The rake and trail is a lot steeper, full lock is further, the bike keeps wanting to stand itself up. I thought it would be a bigger comparo between the two, where there were a lot of subtleties, and it's just not. It's so much different. At this point, I can't really find a reason why this bike, or where it might be inferior to the 1250. Stay tuned. Pretty damn pumped on this thing.